I was no longer his daughter. My gaze fell upon the placard on the check-in counter, a chill seeping into my very core. Clara, the family letdown. The stark, small letters pierced me. I blinked then again, hoping it was a misreading, but the words remained cold and detached, like a label on a bottle rather than an indictment of my worth. Laughter echoed from the lounge. I didn't need to see to know it was Brenda's voice, the one who always managed to diminish me under the guise of a harmless jest. I looked up and met her knowing, pleased grin as she sipped her spritzer. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with fury. My fingers tightened around the placard, the cool plastic biting into my skin. What could I do? Toss it aside? Rip it to shreds? Grab a drink and hurl it in her face? No, I knew this game too well. Brenda thrived on provoking me. If I reacted, I'd be the volatile, selfish daughter, the disappointment, just as she'd branded me. I drew a deep breath and placed the placard back on the counter, feigning indifference. But inside, I knew I hadn't just set down a piece of plastic, I'd relinquished the last vestige of my patience. My father's 60th birthday celebration was at the grand estate Brenda never missed an opportunity to flaunt. A magnificent chandelier glittered above, and the dining table was laden with opulent dishes, meals forbidden to me as a child. The attendees were his closest associates, or rather, those who matched his standing, affluent, influential. I entered, feeling like an outsider. No one truly acknowledged me. The greetings, the merriment, the toasts, they flowed around me, leaving no space for me. I scanned the room for a familiar face. Where was my father? Then I saw him, the center of attention, like a monarch receiving his subjects. He was radiant as Penelope, Brenda's daughter, boasted about her new position. Beside her, Harrison, Brenda's son, nodded in agreement with a self-satisfied smirk. They were the ideal children my father had always desired, and I was merely an afterthought. My father's eyes flickered towards me, a fleeting glance, but long enough for me to grasp everything, the distance, the apathy, and the crushing disappointment. He hadn't wanted me here. He hadn't even bothered to conceal it. A quiet, bitter chuckle escaped me. What had I anticipated? An embrace? A warm, "My dear Clara, I'm so glad you could make it." Don't be foolish, Clara. I approached the refreshment table, taking a flute of sparkling cider from a passing server. My hand trembled slightly, but I wouldn't let anyone witness it. I wouldn't allow anyone to perceive me as weak. What on earth are you doing here, Clara? I muttered to myself. I took a sip, the cold liquid tracing a path down my throat, offering no solace to the knot in my chest. Then footsteps approached from behind. Clara, long time no see. Brenda's voice, saccharine and sharp. I turned to face her insincere smile. Brenda, I offered a small smile. It certainly has been a while. She tilted her head, her eyes assessing me with a calculating gaze. I'm surprised to see you here, she trailed off, then shrugged. I thought you were occupied with, what was it again? Freelancing. I knew precisely what she implied. I didn't work for a prestigious firm. I lacked a coveted title. I didn't measure up to this family's standards. I smirked, but before I could retort, she let out a soft laugh, patting my arm lightly. But anyway, it's probably good you're here. Then, lowering her voice just enough for me to hear, she added, especially since someone prepared a little something for you. Something? I frowned, then followed her gaze towards the check-in counter, and understanding dawned. The something was that wretched placard. A wave of fury washed over me, but instead of succumbing to it, I felt something unexpected, a cold, resolute calm. I am no longer that 14-year-old girl. I am no longer the vulnerable girl who had to endure their cruel taunts. I placed my drink on the table and inhaled deeply. If they wanted to play games, I would show them I was no longer the Clara they could ridicule. I stood in the center of the gathering, the laughter and chatter around me nothing more than background noise. Memories flooded back, pulling me to a time when I was a trusting child who believed my father's affection was unwavering. Then, I was his entire world. I recalled the way he held my hand tightly crossing the avenue, the afternoons spent teaching me to pitch in the yard, and the nights I nestled in his arms during thunderstorms. I used to believe that love was immutable. Then Brenda entered our lives. My father remarried when I was 10, and everything shifted so rapidly I didn't even realize I was being relegated to the periphery of his life. Initially, I tried to adapt. I smiled when my father introduced me to Brenda as the sweetest little girl you'll ever meet, though his tone suggested I was merely a child who needed to fit in rather than a genuine part of the family. Brenda, with her perfectly coiffed auburn hair and overly sweet smile, embraced me tightly upon our first meeting and declared, "We're going to be such a happy family, Clara. We're going to love each other like real family." But we never truly functioned as one. Brenda's affection was solely for her two children, Penelope and Harrison. I was simply an obstacle. Within a year of their marriage, my father was no longer my father. At first, the changes were subtle. He began missing my parent-teacher conferences but never failed to attend Penelope's ballet recitals. He was too busy to take me to the park as promised, yet he always made time for Harrison's soccer matches. I still remember a Friday afternoon when I was 11. I stood outside the school for nearly an hour waiting for him, but he never arrived. I walked home, tears streaming down my face, only to find him in the living room laughing with Brenda and her children. "Did you forget about me?" I asked, my voice trembling from running and crying. He merely sighed, not even looking at me. "Clara, I was busy." "You're old enough to understand, aren't you?" "Understand?" So Penelope and Harrison didn't have to understand, but I did? I said nothing because I knew that in this house, my voice held no weight. I practically vanished. Penelope and Harrison were treated like royalty, and I was the one who did everything. "Clara, keep an eye on Penelope for me." "Clara, do the dishes." I made dinner. "Clara, you're older now, stop asking for so much." Older. That was their justification for every unfairness. I was older, so I had to yield. I was older, so I had to comprehend. I was older, so I no longer required my father's attention. I recall once when Penelope spilled juice all over the table. Brenda turned to me and said, "Clean it up, Clara." But I didn't do it, I protested. Brenda simply shrugged. "But you're the older sister." Penelope and Harrison could create chaos, yell, do whatever they pleased without consequence. And I had to remain silent and accept it. Everything reached a breaking point when I turned 18. Before my mother passed away, she had established a university fund for me. Every penny was saved with the hope that I could become independent and leave this house behind. But when I needed that money, it was gone. I still remember the shock of checking my bank balance and seeing zero. My throat constricted as I turned to my father and asked what had happened, and he stated it calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I used it to help Harrison get into university." My heart shuddered. "That was my money," I whispered, my voice shaking with anger. "Harrison needed it more," he shrugged. "You can still apply for grants, right?" At that moment, I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. I didn't need to ask Brenda. I already knew she was the one who had influenced him. In her eyes, I wasn't worth a future. I loathed him from that moment onward. That night, I packed my belongings and left that house forever. I supported myself, taking any job I could find to survive. I didn't need his money, his insincere affection, or this so-called family. But now, standing in the midst of this lavish party with that family letdown placard resting on the table, I realized something. I wasn't the one who should be disappointed. They were. I tightened my grip on my drink and smiled. If they believed I would remain silent and endure as before, they were mistaken. I didn't just leave that house with a suitcase. I carried every wound they had inflicted upon me over the years. The day I boarded that bus out of town, I vowed I would never need them again, and I kept that promise. I immersed myself in my studies, working 3 jobs simultaneously to afford tuition, while Harrison enjoyed his university life with endless parties and extravagant vacations funded by my father. I pushed myself to exhaustion just to afford a cramped apartment near campus. I never complained. I had no time for resentment, no energy for nostalgia. I had one objective: never return to that house. And I succeeded. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. No one from my family attended my graduation. No texts, no calls, nothing. But I never expected them to. I stood among hundreds of graduates, watching his parents embrace their children, took photographs, and celebrated their achievements. And I stood there, proud of myself in silence. Even after leaving them, I wasn't truly free. Occasionally, I would receive invitations to my father's gatherings, not because he cared, but to uphold the facade of a good father. I never wanted to go, but pressure from relatives, the ones who always said, "Don't let the past affect the family," compelled me to attend a few times. And each time, my father found a way to belittle me. I recall a holiday gathering a few years ago. I reluctantly accepted the invitation and returned to the house I once called home. I had hoped that after all this time, perhaps my father had changed, but the moment I walked in, I knew everything remained the same. Harrison, dressed in an expensive suit, boasted about the position my father had used his influence to secure for him. Penelope sat on the sofa, a diamond ring sparkling on her finger, bragging about her recent European trip. And my father, upon seeing me, simply smirked and said, "Still doing that freelance work, huh? Times must be tough. I could inquire around and find you a real job." A real job. Those words struck me like a blow, as if everything I had accomplished meant nothing. I wanted to tell him I had started my own firm, that I was more successful than ever, that I didn't need his assistance. But I knew it wouldn't matter to him. To my father, if I wasn't following the path he had envisioned, I would always be a disappointment. I placed my glass down, met his eyes, and said, "You don't need to worry about me. I'm doing just fine." But he merely smirked as if I were deluding myself. "If you're really doing well, then why are you here alone?" I left the gathering immediately after that. After that evening, I declined every invitation from my family. I blocked Brenda's number, ignored Penelope's messages, and disregarded the passive-aggressive remarks from relatives. I didn't need them. But sometimes, whether I wanted to or not, I still had to face my father. The last time was at Penelope's wedding. I didn't want to attend, but a part of me felt I should, if only to demonstrate that I had moved on. When I entered the reception hall, my father looked at me in surprise, not because he was happy to see me, but because I didn't resemble the failure he had always assumed I would be. "Clara," he blinked. I wore an elegant emerald dress, my hair styled in a sophisticated updo, my makeup subtle yet striking. I was no longer the vulnerable girl he once knew. "Hello, father." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He studied me for a moment before clearing his throat. "Have you found a stable job yet?" I almost laughed. Even now, he couldn't acknowledge my success. I didn't need to find one. I built my own. "Oh," he nodded, but skepticism lingered in his eyes. "That's fine, I suppose, but if you ever want a real career, I can help you." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I simply felt pity. He would never admit that I had thrived without him, because if he did, he would have to confront the truth that he had been wrong. I placed a hand on his shoulder and offered a small smile. "No need, father, but you can be proud of me or not. It makes no difference to me." Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there stunned. I was no longer that 18-year-old girl craving his approval. I didn't need it anymore. Now, standing at his 60th birthday celebration, staring at the family letdown placard on the table, all I felt was amusement. Did they think this would wound me? They had no idea I had severed ties with this family long ago. I lifted my drink, taking a slow sip of cider. If they believed I would remain silent, they were mistaken. I let my gaze sweep across the room, where everyone was dressed impeccably, laughing and socializing as if they were part of some flawlessly choreographed performance. But I wasn't part of the act. No one greeted me warmly. No one truly cared that I was present. Their glances flickered towards me for a fleeting moment before quickly moving on, as if I were a blemish on their perfect creation. That was acceptable. I was accustomed to it. My father stood in the corner, a drink in hand, engaged in conversation with a group of influential-looking individuals. When his eyes met mine, I saw a brief flash of surprise, but it lasted only a second. Then his expression reverted to its usual indifference, as if my presence here held no significance whatsoever. I almost laughed. How foolish I had been to ever expect more from him. I slowly made my way towards the bar, where where Harrison and Penelope were chatting with a group of relatives. I had no intention of joining them, but Penelope's sharp voice cut through the air, causing me to pause. Father was so generous to pay for my wedding, but honestly, I think that's only natural. She twirled the sparkling diamond ring on her finger, her voice dripping with smugness. Of course, Harrison nodded. Father always prioritizes the children with potential. The children with potential. I pressed my lips together, taking another sip of cider to suppress the anger rising within me. So what did that make me in their eyes? But I didn't have time for anger because at that moment, I grasped the most significant detail of the evening. A small table was positioned near the entrance where name placards were neatly arranged. No one seemed to pay much attention to them except me. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the names. Uncle Miles, Cousin Rachel, Neighbor Tim. And then I saw it. My heart skipped a beat. Directly in front of me was a placard bearing my name, but beneath it, printed in small yet unmistakable letters, were two words that made my blood run cold: the letdown. I picked it up, my fingers clenching around the edges until my nails nearly pierced my palm. What a pathetic joke. I didn't need to ask who was responsible. I already knew. Just then, laughter echoed from the lounge, a voice so familiar I didn't even need to turn around to identify it. Brenda. She was laughing, a drink in her hand, her eyes gleaming with amusement as she watched me. I took a deep breath and slowly placed the placard back on the table. I wasn't going to let them win. I didn't snap it in half. I didn't hurl it to the floor. I placed it back neatly, aligning it with the others as if nothing had occurred. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to react the way they wanted me to because I knew precisely what Brenda desired. She wanted me to erupt, to lose control, to create a scene so she could portray me as petty, overly sensitive. But I wouldn't grant her that satisfaction. I turned, raised my drink to my lips, and took a slow sip as if that placard held absolutely no significance for me. And when my eyes met Brenda's, I smiled, a calm, unbothered smile, neither angry nor wounded, just contemptuous. That smile made her frown. Shortly after, my father approached. He didn't inquire about the placard. He showed no sign of anger at the fact that I had just been humiliated at his own celebration. Instead, he merely glanced at me, took a sip of his drink, and said in that infuriatingly indifferent tone, "I didn't think you'd come." I tilted my head, shrugged. Neither did I. A brief silence. "Are you still pursuing that endeavor?" His voice was low, as if attempting politeness but failing to conceal his disdain. "Which endeavor?" I raised an eyebrow. "The company you're managing?" I let out a laugh, unsure if it stemmed from bitterness or exhaustion. "Yes, and it's thriving." He didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at me for a long moment, as if assessing the veracity of my statement. Then he sighed, took a sip of his drink. "Good for you." That was it. No congratulations, no hint of pride, just an empty phrase before he turned and walked away, disappearing back into a circle. I stood there, watching his figure recede. Then I surveyed this room, this place where everyone was complicit in my exclusion. Did they think I would endure all of this in silence? Did they think I would remain quiet? If so, they had forgotten something crucial. I was no longer the Clara they once knew. I set my drink down, took a deep breath, then I picked up my glass again, running my fingertip along the rim. A sharp clink echoed, cutting through the air, and the room fell silent. If they wanted a game, I would give them a memorable performance. I stood in the center of the room, a chilled flute of sparkling cider in hand. The atmosphere shifted, the weight of my actions settling over the party like a dense fog. Conversations dwindled one by one. Heads turned towards me. Some looked perplexed, others curious. But what pleased me most was the expression in my father's eyes, unease. And Brenda, her grip on her spritzer glass tightening, her expression tinged with quiet alarm. They didn't know what I was about to do. I raised my glass slightly and smiled. "I suppose this is a special occasion, isn't it? A grand celebration for the man of the hour." My father's shoulders relaxed slightly, perhaps thinking I would simply offer a polite sentiment and move on. He raised his glass, waiting. I let them wait. I inhaled deeply, allowing the silence to linger, letting them wonder what I would say next. Then, with a voice calm but edged with ice, I continued. My father always taught me that family is meant to be a sanctuary of respect and support, that we should always stand by each other. Isn't that right? A few people nodded, assuming I was reinforcing my father's beliefs. They were wrong. I turned, meeting his gaze directly. But then I realized that for some people, family only exists as long as you adhere to their rules. Deviate from their expectations, and suddenly you become an outcast, a disgrace. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Tension rippled through the crowd like a wave. My father blinked but remained silent. Brenda forced a strained smile, her fingers clutching her glass as if she wanted to shatter it. I used to believe that if I worked diligently enough, if I proved my worth, my father would see me differently, that he would finally acknowledge me. I let out a small, humorless laugh, but then I realized something. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I never even had a chance. Lowering my glass, I let my gaze sweep across the room, meeting each pair of eyes that had once dismissed me. My father only recognized those who followed his prescribed path, the children he could control, mold to his liking. But I chose to forge my own way, and for that, I became the family letdown. I paused, raising an eyebrow with mock amusement. Oh no, wait. They were kind enough to remind me of that with the lovely little placard they prepared just for me. A few people gasped softly. Murmurs began to spread. I saw Harrison frown. Penelope's eyes widened. Brenda attempted to maintain her composure, but her fingers trembled as she placed her glass down. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Clara, not now. I laughed. Not now. I tilted my head. Oh, but father, it seems like it's never the right time for you to acknowledge me as your daughter, is it? Silence. I stepped forward slowly, closing the distance between us all. All my life, I only wanted you to be proud of me, just once. But I understand now. That will never happen because I'm not Harrison, I'm not Penelope, I'm not someone you can manipulate. I saw his jaw clench, but he didn't deny it because he knew I spoke the truth. And my dear stepmother, I turned to Brenda, offering her a slow, disdainful smile. You've spent years attempting to erase me from your perfect little family portrait, but unfortunately for you, I'm still here. Brenda stiffened but forced a saccharine smile. Clara, you're being overly sensitive. It was just a joke. Oh, was it? I interjected, my voice light yet sharp as a shard of glass. Well then, I have a joke for you too. I raised my glass, letting my gaze encompass the room. Happy 60th, father, and congratulations to everyone here. I paused just long enough for them to hold their breath. Because this will be the last time any of you ever see me. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Penelope's jaw dropped. Harrison's brow furrowed. Brenda blinked rapidly, as if struggling to process what was happening. And my father, he was frozen. Clara, don't you dare. But I didn't let him finish. I placed my glass on the table and turned away. No explanations, no hesitation. I could hear the panic behind me. Some voices called my name. I didn't stop. I walked through the doors, feeling lighter than ever before. I wasn't running away, I was liberating myself. And as the door closed behind me, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never returning. I slammed the car door shut, sitting upright in the driver's seat. My breath still hitched from everything that had just transpired. I had actually done it. Not in a fantasy, not in some imagined scenario where I finally possessed the courage to confront them. I had done it right in front of them. My heart still pounded, but not from fear, not from doubt. It was adrenaline, the exhilaration of finally breaking free from the toxic cycle they had ensnared me in. I pressed the ignition but didn't drive away immediately. I sat there, gazing through the windshield at the brightly illuminated estate behind me. The music still played, but I knew no one inside was in a celebratory mood anymore. They were talking, they were stunned, they were furious, and I didn't care. I retrieved my phone from my bag and unlocked it. A stream of messages flooded the screen. Brenda, you've gone too far, Clara. Come back at once. Penelope, are you trying to ruin this party? Unbelievable. Harrison, you seriously have issues. Talk to father. I let out a small, amused scoff, scrolling past them without replying. My phone vibrated in my hand. My father was calling. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. A part of me wanted to answer, to hear what he had to say, but I already knew how it would unfold. He wouldn't apologize. He would only attempt to regain control, to feed me more hollow words about family and responsibility. I declined the call. A text appeared immediately after. "Father, come back. We need to talk." I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to them. The next morning, I awoke in my small apartment, sunlight streaming through the window. No more forced laughter, no more cutting remarks, no more condescending glances. I turned on my phone. Dozens of unread messages. I pressed block number on each name: Father, Brenda, Penelope, Harrison. Done. I sat still for a few moments, waiting to see if guilt would surface, but it never did. All I felt was relief. 3 days later, as I was preparing for work, my phone rang from an unknown number. I hesitated, then decided to answer. My father's voice came through, low and steady as always. "Clara." I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. "I want you to come back," he stated bluntly. "You can't simply walk away from family like this." I let out a quiet laugh, stepping towards the window and looking down at the street below. "Did you call to manipulate me or to apologize?" Silence. I already knew the answer. "Family is supposed to stick together, Clara," his voice softened. "I don't want this to escalate any further." I tightened my grip on the phone. Not escalate further? As if everything they had done to me before wasn't already enough. "You never truly saw me as part of this family," I spoke slowly, each word severing the final connection between us. "Don't pretend you suddenly care now. Clara, don't be selfish." I laughed. "Did you really just say that?" Once again, silence. I pulled the phone away, glanced at the screen, and slowly pressed the button to end the call. No goodbyes. In the weeks that followed, I heard nothing from them. Everything was eerily quiet. No more guilt-tripping messages. No more veiled threats. No more heavy feeling whenever my phone buzzed. But there were moments when I wondered if I had gone too far. Did I truly need to sever all ties? Perhaps I should have given them an opportunity to change. But then I remembered every instance they had abandoned me, every belittling comment, every condescending look. They hadn't changed. They never would. And I realized I had made the right decision.